Arrow Development, later to be known as Arrow Hus, and eventually Arrow Dynamics, was founded in 1946. The long and successful commercial relationship between Arrow and Blackpool Pleasure Beach began in the 1960s and continued into the 1990s. Prior to the opening of Disneyland in California, a team assigned by Walt Disney had been to visit Blackpool Pleasure Beach to gain an understanding of amusement park operations.
Around the same time, Arrow Development was starting to grow, aided by a new commercial relationship with Walt Disney, who was impressed by Arrow and put his faith in them to build several attractions for Disneyland. Blackpool Pleasure Beach's first Arrow Development attraction to be built was the Turnpike in 1960, now known as the Grand Prix. The following year, the unlikely collaboration of Blackpool Pleasure Beach, Walt Disney and Arrow Development was born, with Alice's Wonderland.
The trio's unlikely collaboration is likely to have become a possibility with all three parties in contact with each other for different reasons around the same timescale. Alice's Wonderland was built by Blackpool Pleasure Beach staff under supervision of Arrow and the attraction licensed by Disney. In the early 1960s, Arrow Development introduced a game-changing attraction, the iconic log flume. The idea of the log flume had been inspired by earlier water chute attractions, but the log flume design was groundbreaking technology at the time.
In 1963, Six Flags Over Texas opened the world's first log flume, and it did not take many more years after for Blackpool Pleasure Beach to build one. In 1967, at a cost of £180,000, Blackpool Pleasure Beach opened their own log flume ride built by Arrow. It was not only the first to be built in Britain, but also the longest log flume in the world.
With the growing commercial relationship between Arrow and Blackpool Pleasure Beach, it makes me wonder what could have been in terms of popular Arrow attractions which were being constructed all over the world but were not built at Blackpool Pleasure Beach or in the UK. We'll get to some of the other roller coaster concepts from Arrow later on, but it does surprise me that the Pleasure Beach never built an Arrow Mine Train roller coaster. The Arrow Mine Train roller coaster concept was hugely popular, with the first being built in 1966 and the last to be constructed in 1997.
Back to Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and in 1971, the latest Arrow Development attraction opened at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. At a cost of £150,000 and built by Blackpool Pleasure Beach's staff under the supervision of Arrow, the Gold Mine was born. The Gold Mine was a dark ride attraction with lots of charm, thanks to the well-themed scenes of the miners hard at work or in some cases playing music. In the 1970s, Arrow Development continued to launch new concepts, the most popular being the Arrow Corkscrew roller coaster. The Arrow launched loop roller coaster and steeplechase concepts would also debut, giving Arrow's customers something to consider when picking their next big investment.
There was also a big change at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in the late 70s. Managing director of the Pleasure Beach, valued customer of Arrow, and a good friend of Walt Disney, Leonard Thompson sadly passed away. Leonard's son, Jeffrey Thompson, took the role of managing director and quickly established his own working relationship with Arrow.
In 1977, at a cost of £813,000, Steeplechase opened at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Steeplechase is one of only two of these roller coasters ever to be constructed, with the first opened in 1976 at Knott's Berry Farm, originally known as Cycle Chase and then renamed to Wacky Soapbox Racers before its removal in 1996. Blackpool Pleasure Beach's Steeplechase roller coaster has been the only roller coaster of its kind manufactured by Arrow for 24 years now. The Revolution, an Arrow-launched loop roller coaster, was the next big thing at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, opening in 1979. The Revolution was Europe's first permanent looping roller coaster. However, not quite the first altogether, as Schwarzkopf's Looping Star had debuted the year before on the German fairground circuit.
The Revolution was Arrow's sixth launched loop roller coaster to open. The first opened in Florida at a park called the Boardwalk and Baseball. Overall, only 8 Arrow launched loop roller coasters were built, with 7 of them being relocated or removed fairly early in their lifespan. Blackpool's Revolution is unique for 2 reasons. Firstly, it is the only one which hasn't been relocated, and secondly, unlike the other Arrow launch loop roller coasters, the Revolution has a unique cantilevered support structure. It is worth considering what Blackpool Pleasure Beach could have done instead of Steeplechase and or the Revolution, or even after those roller coasters were built, with so much choice on offer from Arrow development.
The Arrow Corkscrew concept and the Arrow Loop and Corkscrew coaster concepts started to be built in parks from 1975 onwards, which would become a very popular roller coaster, giving thrill seekers the sensation of being taken upside down multiple times on one roller coaster. As popular as the Revolution was at the Pleasure Beach, it didn't stay a unique attraction for long, with the new looping roller coasters being built all over the UK by Arrow's competitors, most notably Corkscrew at Alton Towers, which was built by Vekoma, firmly putting Alton Towers on every thrill seeker's radar in 1980.
In 1989, Arrow Dynamics broke their boundaries and shocked the world with the world's first hyper roller coaster, Magnum Xl 200. Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point held the record for the world's tallest roller coaster for 5 years, before losing its crown to the big one at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Jeffrey Thompson, Blackpool Pleasure Beach's MD at the time, was said to be so impressed by Magnum that he contacted Arrow at the soonest opportunity after riding Magnum to let them know he wanted one of those coasters, but bigger.
Project 1994 would be the last time Blackpool Pleasure Beach and Arrow Dynamics would work together on a new project. The big one was Arrow's fifth and final hypercoaster to be constructed. It would have been interesting to see what else they'd have worked on together if Arrow had been able to compete with its new manufacturing rivals.
The commercial relationship between Arrow and Blackpool Pleasure Beach was the perfect marriage. Arrow were able to get their designs out into the European market, and Blackpool Pleasure Beach had a firm grip on its position as the UK's leading amusement park, with new rides being constructed on a regular basis. Unfortunately, Arrow Dynamics went out of business in 2002. Overall, they constructed 98 roller coasters, with 70 still standing at the time of recording this video. We'll never know how many more attractions Arrow and Blackpool Pleasure Beach would have worked on together if Arrow Dynamics was still around today, but without any doubt at all, Arrow will always have a big place in the history of Blackpool Pleasure Beach.